Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Money Pros. I'm Oliver Tutt, Certified Financial Planner Practitioner, and I'll be your host for the next half hour as we talk about all the issues related to your money, how to make it, how to keep it, and hopefully how to help it grow. So we've got a lot on tap for today's show. Let me give you a rundown on what we're going to be talking about. First up, Bankrate.com, a very popular financial website, came out with a list of the top 50 cities to retire in for 2017. So I thought I'd go over the list, and I thought it was a good opportunity to talk about how you make decisions about where you're going to retire, what priorities you set, the fact that different people's priorities are different. And there's a prominent New England city, a couple of them featured at the top of the list, so we're going to talk about how our local cities fared. We're also going to be joined by our estate planning pro, none other than Karen Delponte, attorney and partner with Cameron Mittleman. She's joining us to talk about her top 4 estate planning issues of 2017. 2017 has been an interesting year, and I think 2018 is going to be an interesting one too. So we're going to be talking about what she's seen as the top issues here as we close in toward the end of 2017. We're also going to be talking about where the market is right now. It's at an all-time high for those of you that are even passively interested in the market, and certainly for those of you that have retirement funds invested in the market, you might be particularly interested in how high the market is. And I'm getting a lot of questions about whether or not people should be concerned. With highs come lows. Are we about to have a correction? Should I be concerned with my retirement funds? So we're going to talk through some of the issues that I talk about with clients. So that's going to be in our third segment. And then finally, a lot of questions about the new tax proposals floating around Congress right now. At this point, the House and the Senate have both passed bills. Now they need to be reconciled. So we still don't know what we're going to get, but a lot of people asking, how is this all going to impact me? So I have a suggestion in our fourth segment. So with all that, let's get right to it. And the first topic is Bankrate.com article that they published on their website about their assessment of the top 50 cities in the United States and where to retire. And the reason I like to talk about this stuff, and we talk about top lists and things like that a lot on the show, the reason why I like to talk about places to retire is one of the most important aspects of retirement planning is you got to visualize it. You have to think about it. If it's sort of this nebulous concept that's way off in the distance, it's going to be very difficult for you to plan for it. And when you start to think about where do I want to be in retirement, that's one of the steps in actually planning for retirement. So I think these lists are great and they trigger that kind of thought. It also points out that there are a lot of different criteria that people use on where they want to retire. For some people it might be cultural activities, for other people it might be health care, for other people it might be weather. I know on my list weather would be very high at the top of the list. And as we look at the Bankrate.com list, while they took weather into account, I don't think it was biased heavily enough for me personally, and you guys might differ as you consider it, but I wanted to walk through some of the information. So they basically looked at the top 50 metro areas in the United States, and they analyzed locations based on multiple factors. The factors that they took into consideration included quality of health care, how high taxes were, the level of crime, cost of living, weather, cultural amenities, and also a concept of the well-being of seniors. And the well-being of seniors they measured based on something called the Gallup Share Care Well-Being Index, which is produced by another organization. So anyway, they looked at all this information. They also looked at information from the U.S. Census Bureau, Tax Foundation, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, Gallup, and the FBI. And they came up with their top 5 list of cities to retire in. So we're going to cover them from 5 down to 1, and let's throw up the slide and we'll talk about them. So first up, number 5 out of 50, Providence, Rhode Island. And this is really what caught my attention because we're often used to seeing Rhode Island and Providence ranked near the bottom of national lists for any number of things. But Providence came in number 5. Pluses for Providence, including low crime rate, excellent health care, and a very good score on the Senior Well-Being Index. Now, of course, it didn't do great when it came to things like public transit, certainly didn't do well when it came to taxes, and it didn't score nearly high enough for me when it came to weather. But that's Providence. Next one up on the list, number 4, Denver, Colorado. Way too cold for me. Number 3, Los Angeles, California. That's currently on fire, so I don't think I'd be retiring there anytime soon, but definitely would be too big for me, but scored highly in a variety of other things. And then number 2, Boston, Massachusetts, another New England city. Did quite well with public transportation, quality of health care, a number of other things. And number 1 on the list, and this is what, with all due respect to folks from Pittsburgh, this is what makes me call this list into question somewhat. But Pittsburgh did excellent. Number one, very good or great scores for cost of living, crime, healthcare, and senior well-being. But again, would not score nearly high enough on the list when it came to weather. But these are important considerations. So these are all criteria that you could take into account as you consider where you want to retire. You don't have to do it the way Bankrate.com says, but it's certainly something worth getting the conversation going. All right, up next, we're going to be joined by Cameron Delponte. We're going to be talking about the top estate planning issues of 2017. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Money Pros, and I'm joined by our special guest, Money Pro Cameron Delponte with Cameron Mittleman. Great to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
So interesting topic, like the top issues of 2017, and I alluded to in the beginning of the show that 2017 is kind of a crazy year, I think, for a variety of reasons. We have a new president in office. There's a lot of legislative activity. We're going to talk about some of that. And so we want to go through, you've given us 4 issues. We're going to cover them one by one and talk about why you saw them as significant in 2017, what ramifications you see for people down the road, what people need to do to address them as part of their estate plan. So let's put up that slide and we'll talk about the first one. And that is going to be the potential for changes to the estate tax law. Now, this is going to be an ongoing subject of conversation in a host of different financial areas, right? So we're not talking about all of the proposed tax law changes, but specifically as it relates to estate tax law, significant modifications talked about based on what we know right now in the House and Senate bills. How is this impacting people for 2017? What are your thoughts on this?
People have a high interest in this, but when you get into the details of it, you realize, unfortunately, it does not affect many of us because we don't have the level of net worth that it makes a difference. Just to put it in perspective, right now in the federal level, there's an unlimited marital exemption. So whatever you leave your spouse of whatever amount, there's no estate tax. Once you're beyond that and leaving assets to anyone else, today there's a $5.49 million exemption. So having said that, less than 1% of Americans pay a federal estate tax when they die.
So let's stop and think about that and make sure maybe people are sipping their coffee, not paying a lot of attention. $5.4 million. If your estate is under that amount, elimination of a tax that wouldn't have applied to you in the first place is really a non-issue.
Exactly. And it's based on cost of living increases to go up over time. Next year, if the law stayed the same, it'd be up to $5.6 million. Legislation that's pending right now would increase that limit to $11 million. Or there may be no federal estate tax, so stay tuned. We don't know. My guess is that might be one of the throwaways when compromises are made because it doesn't affect many people.
So it sounds like a big deal, but because it grabs so few Americans, it's an easy bargaining chip for the different parties to use. I think it's also worth pointing out that this isn't the first time that your field has had to deal with the potential for either changes to estate tax law or the idea that it could get eliminated. While we don't deal with changes to income tax, major income tax regulation very often, estate tax law has been subject to a lot of changes over the years, right?
It makes our Decembers very interesting.
So this is nothing new and probably not going to have a lot of impact on a lot of people in 2017, and we'll just have to take a wait-and-see attitude for 2018, I suppose.
Exactly.
All right, let's go back to our slide and talk about the next issue. And this is, I found this intriguing. Adult children, second relationships. So what we're talking about here, and I had to try to put it briefly on the slide, is you have parent, mom or dad, and they are no longer with the parent of their adult children, whether through they deceased or divorce or what have you, and they formed a new relationship. And the children are adults, so it's not like, hey, let's go out to the ballpark and we'll buy you cotton candy or something like that. It's a whole new level of concern. So is this unique for 2017, or has this always been a problem?
I'm seeing more and more situations like this and more problematic situations like this than I've ever seen before.
What type of things do you see coming up generally?
The types of things that come up when there's discord is when the parent of the adult child is either impaired or they're deceased. very often pent-up emotions spring to life at that point, and people do things at a very emotional time that they may otherwise not do. So we have circumstances where a person dies, their significant other of 20 years isn't allowed at the funeral, isn't allowed at a wake, isn't allowed to go back in that person's apartment or home to even get their own personal belongings. Or on the other side, it could be that the second spouse or the significant other is excluding the children from certain things or certain information. And so I try to say to my clients, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. If you want certain things to happen, do planning during your lifetime so you've taken care of it, and don't leave it to fate at what's a really difficult time for your family members. So people in Rhode Island, for example, can do things. We have a form called a funeral planning agent designation. And it's an emotional time. If you have any possibility of discord, address it during your lifetime, fill out that form with your attorney or with a funeral home, and make provisions during lifetime so it's not left to chance and people don't get hurt in the process.
So, while it almost sounds like something where you'd have to be on the verge of a family counselor to walk people through this, and there's probably a lot of similarities between that and what you have to do sometimes, right? There is planning that can be done to help avoid. It's not just about the taxes or about how the cash is going to get from one person to another. It's about all the anxiety that surrounds interpersonal relationships when a loved one dies, basically.
Definitely, but there also are financial elements of that very often one person is helping their significant other or spouse, and if they die and leave it all to their children, well, how is that spouse going to be supported or their other person going to be supported? And so you really do need to think ahead about those things and make provisions in writing to protect the people you love. The people you love.
And not assume, and I think this is advice that it extends to a lot of areas of estate planning, that it's going to happen the way you want it to happen. Things don't fall into place generally unless you direct them into those places.
Generally true. There are some very good situations. I don't mean to apply that there's always discord or always a problem, but I look at it this way. If you plan ahead, put your wishes in writing in the correct way, what harm is there?
Right, it's not going to offend anybody that was going to happen anyway.
No, what harm is there, and you can protect people you love.
Excellent point. All right, let's move on to the third issue, and that is spouses left off of beneficiary designations. Now, that seems like a mistake to me. What is that something you're seeing more frequently? Let's talk about what the situation is, if you're seeing it more frequently, and really what the right way to do it is.
I am seeing it more frequently, and I'm seeing that people are changing financial institutions. They think they have a beneficiary designation in place because they were with Bank X or Financial Institution X. There are two financial institutions past that at this point, and they're thinking their old designation is in effect. Or they're thinking, because they have a will, they're thinking, oh, everything's all set, it's in my will that my wife is getting X. But what people really don't appreciate is that if it's a beneficiary designation asset, like a retirement account, like an annuity, like a life insurance policy, whatever's on that form governs. And if that form is blank, under a lot of the rules or plans, the asset then goes to the person's estate. So for the estate to claim that asset, now the spouse has to spend the time and money and hire a lawyer and open an estate with the probate court in order to claim that asset. And I've seen that several times this past year, and I just feel badly because you want to say, if all that person had done is filled out an up-to-date beneficiary form naming their spouse could have easily claimed the asset and wouldn't have had any of that stress or cost or delay.
So you raise an excellent point, because as you were talking particularly about individual retirement accounts, it strikes me that, and I've opened up plenty of them in my day, that they're going to get your name, your address, your phone number, your social security number, your date of birth. That's going to be consistent. They're going to ask you who you want as your beneficiaries, but you don't need to provide that information.
Correct.
So it's very easy to overlook that, to say, gee, I don't have my wife's social security number handy, so I don't fill it in, even though in most times you can name them without putting that tax ID number in there. And so it's a very easy thing to overlook, or to think that, gee, I did this 3 accounts ago, it should have carried forward.
Right, or I did a will, so I don't have to worry about that because the will leaves everything to my wife, but the will doesn't apply to that unless you take the step to open probate, and it just seems unfortunate. The other fallout from that with a retirement account is if it's payable to the estate, and if the spouse can't do a spousal rollover, all the money might need to come out in 5 years under the 5-year rule, and you're accelerating the income tax on that asset as well.
Losing an opportunity to potentially lower taxes or spread them out over a longer period of time. And with the last bit of time we have left, let's talk about the last item, which is making gifts to children to buy a home. And I would think this is becoming potentially increasingly more common as homes simply get more expensive, and it's just more common that younger adults need help from their parents while they're still alive, rather than maybe in years past waiting for inheritances or things like that. Talk to us about this issue.
You're exactly correct, and especially with housing costs high in the Northeast, many people still have school loans, so they really need help buying a house. And they're asking me about the gifting rules. So keep in mind, people always think about that $14,000 a year tax-free that they can give to anyone, which, by the way, is going up to $15,000 January 1.
Okay.
And that's an amount you can give. There are no filings. You don't get a deduction. The person doesn't take it into income. But what people very often don't realize is if they want to give a larger amount, $100,000, they have a lifetime exemption for gifting of $5.4 million. So they can give away that $100,000. They don't pay a tax. The person receiving it doesn't pay a tax. But if they're over that $14,000, they need to file a gift tax return the following April.
So definitely important things to keep in mind. 2017 was a busy year. I don't think 2018 is going to be a sleeper either.
I don't either.
Karen, thanks again for joining us. All right, up next on the Money Pros, we're going to be talking about where the market's at and if you should be worried about your retirement funds. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Money Pros. With the stock market hitting highs seemingly every day, it's interesting that people's level of concern about a correction is rising. I'm seeing increased phone calls to my office from clients wondering if they should be concerned with their retirement funds, if I'm expecting a downturn, and things along those lines. So I wanted to share some advice, give you some perspective. If you've got retirement funds, particularly if you're close to retirement, what you should be thinking about. Now, disclaimer, this advice is not for people that don't have a well-thought-out portfolio. If you don't have a well-balanced and diversified portfolio specific to your time horizon and risk tolerance, you got to address that issue before you address any of these other issues. But presuming you have a quality portfolio put together for the long term, here are 3 things to consider as you start to worry about a possible market correction. Number 1, market drops are normal. You know what? I can guarantee you the market is going to go down. It's completely normal. In fact, 10% drops in the market happen anywhere from every 12 to 18 months historically. We're about 20 months in since we've seen a 10 percentage point drop. So technically we're overdue, but you know what? The market doesn't follow a schedule. But it's totally normal, and if the market didn't drop, there'd be something wrong. Because, you know what, if the market only went straight up, it would look like a bank account. And if it looked like a bank account, it would have a very similar rate of return to a bank account, and that is not why we invest. So this volatility is something you have to be willing to accept as an investor, and if the market does go down, it would be totally normal and not a surprise. Number 2, market drops are unpredictable. I just got done saying that I can guarantee you the market's going to go down. But I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, or 3 years from now. And the problem is, because you don't know when it's going to go down, you're faced with a challenge. Is it going to go down? And if it's going to go down, where am I going to put my money? And if I did, in fact, take my money out of the market and I got lucky and I guessed right, now I got to guess right again as to when to get back in the market. Many people were concerned that there would be a giant market drop if President Trump was elected to the presidency. Well, you know what? He got elected and the market didn't go down. In fact, it's gone up substantially. So what if you were one of those investors that pulled their money out of the market on day one, and now you've been sweating over the past 10 months as to whether or not you should get back in? You just can't manage money that way. So drops are certain, and drops are also unpredictable. And finally, if you're worried about your retirement funds and you're saying, you know what, I'm going to retire next month or next year, and I don't know if I can take another market drop, here's something to consider. Retirement is not the end of investing. It's the beginning of phase 2. Retirements last a very, very long time. Hopefully they last a very long time, but we have to make plans as if our retirement could be as many as 20 or 30 years. So it's not as if you're going to need every dime of your retirement funds on day one of your retirement. It's just a phase change. It's not the end of the investment process. So keep those things in mind. If you've got a well-balanced, well-diversified portfolio that is appropriate for your risk tolerance and time horizon, then speculating on the next market drop is doing nothing but waste time. Just enjoy it while it lasts and be prepared that it doesn't last forever. All right, so that's a little wisdom from me on investments. Finally, up next, we're going to talk about the tax plan and how you might get an idea of how potential tax proposals could affect your tax return next year. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Money Pros viewer question time, and this is more a compilation of a lot of questions I'm getting recently from viewers, clients, and any number of people. And essentially, folks are asking this. I'm hearing a lot about potential changes to federal income taxes. You can't turn on the news without hearing stories about it. Is there a way to see if I'll be better off or not? Now, this is going to be a topic that's going to come up a lot on the Money Pros. I know we'll have our tax pro, Greg Piccaro, here to talk about potential and actual tax law changes. But people are very curious. Now, first of all, here's where we're at. The House passed a bill. The Senate passed a bill. Now the two houses of branches of Congress have to reconcile that whole thing before they can put a bill on President Trump's desk to sign. So nobody really has any idea what the law might look like in 2018. But there have been a number of proposals, and I did find a good calculator that I thought did an interesting job of at least trying to take the various proposals into context. So if you go to our Facebook page, go on Facebook, search for the Money Pros, and our latest post is a link to a calculator that's on CBS Market Watch, and it actually does a pretty good job. Now, my advice is grab your tax return from last year so you have the figures you need, but that's so far the best tool I've found to give you an idea. So hopefully that points you in the right direction, and hopefully you make out better and not worse. That's it for the Money Pros. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next Sunday, folks. Take care.